This is Scenic Roots Talking Writing. Our guest is singer and songwriter Rachelle Barr, who makes music as Cartinglee. Rachelle lives in Ooltewah and teaches French at Ooltewah High School. Growing up, she conceived of an ideal place to where she could escape in her imagination, a place called Cartinglee. Her most recent album, A Little Fog, is a collection of songs evoking the dreamlike reality of Cartinglee, except perhaps for this one song that reflects her love of French culture. With the gifted Sean Perkinson playing guitar, this song, called Wasp Honey, has the mood and feel of a vintage Django Reinhardt shuffle.
Show
Our guest, Rachelle Barr, Cartinglee, from her new album, A Little Fog. You spend your life as a teacher, and you were talking about earlier about teaching being a conversation. And that would seem to perfectly dovetail with the same approach that you use when you make music.
Absolutely. And especially, it's easiest to think about it, the conversation with the people that I play music with, but it also is a connection with the listener. And the dynamic is so different in a live musical experience, which I have not had in a long time. But I'm so excited because I'm going to start playing shows. As soon as this album is out, it's time. It's time for me to go back into that realm, and I can't wait.
I think that's a common feeling. I've heard that from a lot of people.
We feel the moment is here. Yeah.
So the first thing that strikes me when you say that is the difference one song to another on your record.
Yes.
Did you work with the same musicians on all the tracks?
I did.
You did? Wow, that's impressive.
The exception of Wasp Honey, our guitar teacher, my guitar teacher, actually came in and did the guitar on that track because it is required a lot of skill, and we wanted it to be done well, to be done skillfully. Yeah, that's Sean Perkinson. Sean Perkinson played the guitar.
Which song was it?
Wasp Honey.
Oh, yes. I was going to say, yeah. Because
gypsy jazz kind of feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like Django and Stefan all of a sudden stumbled into the room.
Yes.
And it has a really, it's great. Talk about conversation. That has a kind of conversational swing.
Yeah. Yes. That song was so much fun to write and record. And one of the songs that kind of, I think, created the sort of dreamscape of this album, that song was in the back of my mind, not so much as I wrote the rest of the songs, but as I chose which ones were going to ultimately end up on this album, because I feel like this album is the first album I've done and the first set of recordings I've done that really represent the feeling of Cartinglee. So the feeling of the project is there in these songs. And yes, as far as genre, they're very diverse. But I think the mood and the feeling is relatively cohesive. Actually, I think it's very cohesive. And I think it's something that we were sort of privileged to do because, I'm totally independent as an artist. I don't have to do what anybody tells me. There's my freedom to make artistic choices. One of the things I really wanted to do was to be creative with genre and yet still sound like the same artist in every song. And I really think that we achieved that on this record, which is really cool. Yeah, go ahead. Well,
for the most part, I think you're playing the piano, right?
I am. The guitar on some of the tracks, but also I'm a good guitar player, but I am surrounded by better guitar players than myself. So I sometimes, when it comes to recording, just for the sake of ease, I relinquish those responsibilities to others who will do them faster. I know that it'll take me like 6 takes. It'll take my boyfriend 1.
How many musicians do you have working with you on the record?
Well, let's see. As far as recording, I believe there were 4 of us plus Sean. So there's obviously me, and then my boyfriend, Eric Simpson, who you may have had him on the show a couple times, actually. His music is under Dream Journal. That's his moniker, I guess. He's a phenomenal musician. So obviously I love him. But even beyond that, it's a privilege to work with him on these projects. And a lot of the solutions on this album, which as we listen to different songs and talk about different songs, some of the problems that we needed solutions to, we might get to talk about some of those, but they came from him.
The arrangement ideas.
Some of them. We really, most of them came from me, but then I would be like, I don't know how to do this thing that I want. I don't know how to create this feeling that I want. And he's like, I think I do. So then he would step in and take over, and it would work well. So.
One of my favorite songs is Amaranth.
Oh, yes.
Which sounds to my ear like vintage Elton John.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Tell me more.
Well, before he became Captain Fantastic.
Right.
And I guess Bernie's always written fairly personal lyrics, but on those early albums, there's a sweetness and a naivete about the sound of the record that disappeared after he started being Elton.
Right.
which I can still remember now. I can still remember this young girl. She must have been about 16, and I was working with her in a record store, and she just loved Elton John because of the Captain Fantastic record. You know, it was a pop record. Wow, you wouldn't have been listening to him 2 years ago.
Right,
you know.
with the music he made then.
It's not that the music was bad. It's just that I miss that sound.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And that's what that has that. It's kind of it's almost like chamber music. It's very gentle and very
intimate.
It's a reverie.
Yes. Yes, and that is definitely the intention. I like that. It's a reverie.
Ride each muddy wave upon the swift highway sea. An ancient and swelling song follows you home.
So then, if I'm not mistaken, the next song is called Picture of the Cloud.
Yeah.
Which sounds like Arcade Fire.
Oh, it does. The song itself
different, you know?
Yes.
The arrangement, you know.
Yeah.
The way it works with the piano, and it's piano driven again. But it's piano driven the way Arcade Fire stuff is.
With a lot of energy and drive, and
It's like Elton on hyperspeed, you know. So is that one of the songs where Eric had a hand in the arrangement? Because that's what it's, because that's a rock and roll arrangement on that, strikes me.
Well, that's an interesting question because it's so organic, and since we're in a relationship with each other, it's kind of hard because that conversation is just so dynamic and so constant. You know, when it came to Amaranth, Eric is the one who had the idea of using the accordion on Amaranth, for example. And then I think that he helped me write the progression for the breakdown in Picture of the Cloud. It might have even been just his idea, the progression. But it's true that the other instrumentalists, so Zach Spence as our drummer, and he actually has music on Out Everywhere under Empty Dress is the name of his project. And then Michael DeBacker, who I know Michael DeBacker's been in here a couple times.
His name's familiar.
And his project, his current project is the Ocoee Boys, but a lot of his music is also released under his name, which maybe helps us remember who he is.
I think the Ocoee Boys were here at one point, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a bewildering number of musicians have been through here at this point, you know, and I have a hard time keeping track of everybody. But it's a nice problem to have.
So Michael played bass. So one of the things that was kind of cool is that I would, because of the way that time works out and because we recorded it all in my living room, it wasn't like the whole band got together and recorded a song that we had arranged that we played together because we... First of all, don't have that many microphones right now, I don't think. We don't have the space to do that. What room would we put the drum set in? Like, how could we really make that work?
So when you record a drum, you need multiple mics for that, don't you?
You do, and
Ideally.
You do. We learned so much about recording through the course of recording this album. You definitely want multiple mics. I think usually you have room mics and you have, you know, a mic on the kick and a mic on the snare, and you might have a mic over the toms. Even so, the cymbals come out higher than everything else, and you know, and then you know, the poor person who has to mix it has to make sense of whatever you've created. You know, I say the poor person because you know we handed our draft off to an expert. Thankfully, my brother-in-law Pat Jones mixes. He does it professionally. He mixes for Toro y Moi and Washed Out, and some other people that I can't remember the names of right now. But yeah, he's out of LA. I mean, he's a professional. This is what he does. And so thankfully, I was able to pass the recordings that we did off to him, and he helped us bring it together. He helped us understand the process. He mixed a lot of it with us there so that we could learn from him. And then ultimately, he polished everything off. And then I sent it off to a mastering engineer.
As I understand it, you know, the whole mixing process, I mean, it's so individual.
Yes.
You know, it's something that I don't think most of us listening to music think that much about. And it's only because I've been involved in it directly that I've really come to understand what that means. And
people make a lot of choices. You make a lot of individual choices.
And the surprising thing, frankly, is how few people, after they finish a session, say to Sam, "So who's going to mix this?" Right. There was a guy, I forget who it was now, but it was almost like a revelation. Sam's like, "Oh, nobody's ever asked me that before," you know. But they were really concerned because they knew exactly what that meant.
Right,
you know?
right. Who's going to be make things choices about the sounds for us? Yeah, absolutely.
And what he's going to give preeminence and all the rest of it in the way it's put together. It's almost counterintuitive to many people when you say two different mixes could be almost a different song.
Oh, absolutely. absolutely. They completely can be. And I got, in the process of recording this album, of course, Pat would send me different versions. And sometimes I have to be like, wow, that's really not the feeling I was going for at all. and then we would have to work together to come up with how, because I was still learning the language of even telling him how to create the different pieces. Like I know a language of mood and of music and of feeling. Mm-hmm. And he knows that language too, but he also knows a language of, EQ and reverb and compression and, all of the different tools that he has, all of the different patches that he can use if I am missing a sound or, all of these different things that he can do to enhance the recording or to give it that feeling that we're going for. It's like he can translate this sort of unsayable thing, this.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Take a picture of the cloud as an example. Mm-hmm.
That one,
I'm sure that benefited from more compression.
Was the hardest one, he said, to mix. Even the last day before I passed it to the mastering engineer, he was like, I just wasn't happy with it. I did another pass. And I really went with that one. The last one that he sent me, the day that I was sending it off to the mastering engineer, that was the best one he had done. And I was like, I agree with you. This is better. So, we took it and ran with it.
What, in your ear, was the difference between the different iterations of it?
It's a muddy song in a lot of ways because the piano part is very spaced out. So I have the bass line in the piano. Mm-hmm. And then I also have it's 3 notes. It's a major 7th chord, really. But that is like a drone. It goes over and over and over again. Da, 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 throughout the whole song, except for the breakdown. It's that same part. And then within that, you also have, you have an electric guitar that's kind of echoing that chord that has that same sort of rhythm and feel. You also have the bass line that's actually echoing the bass that I'm doing on the piano. So you have things that are kind of like on top of each other. And so there's some space to fill in, and there's a sort of question of like, where does each sound belong to make it its own thing? As far as like in space, like in the soundscape, mm-hmm. in kind of like a panorama of sound, like where does it belong? And that's true for like EQ and also kind of like in space, like where you're hearing the sounds come from. How can you give it a really full experience instead of everything sort of being lumped together in one place? Which I mean is part of the mixing process anyway. But with that song, it was really muddy just because of the feel and the vibe and the drive of the song and the way the instrumentation was. And I think that's what made it really difficult.
It's dense.
It is dense. Yeah. It is dense.
It's the antithesis of Amaranth in many ways.
We all
which is very open and it's relatively simple compared to... They make a nice juxtaposition on the record.
It's interesting because that was the one thing that Zach, our drummer, said to me. He was like, listen, whatever you do, I don't have any other things to say about the order of this album, except I really, really think that Picture of the Cloud and Amaranth belong together. They're back to back. One or the other goes first, and they belong together. They're a pair. They're a team. And I was like, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. And that's the other thing I was going to say about tracking the album. What was cool is everybody did have a part in arranging, because the way that it happened, I wasn't always there when all of the tracking was done. During the time that we were doing this, I was teaching, so I'd be gone during the day. But Zach, I think, was working dinner delivered at the time. This is COVID, so we were all scrambling. And so I think, he would be able to do stuff during the day. So he would just turn it on and work on it sometimes. And I wouldn't be there. And so he would come up with what he came up with. And Picture the Cloud, I think he and Eric did together. And I wasn't even there for when they recorded the drum part of that. And so you just kind of have to be like, I trust your musicianship. And if I don't like it, I'll tell you anyway. So you know what I mean?
I do. That's an interesting choice. If you were to put Amaranth after that song, then it comes across as... okay, you can relax now. Mm-hmm. You can slow down, take a breath. Mm-hmm. If you do it the other way around, then you move people into a completely different mood. From the can't be calmed, like a bit like a ship or a sailing vessel.
Right. Well, it's in 6/8 that song, Amaranth.
On smooth water into a storm.
Yeah. And of course. That's interesting because Amaranth is in 6/8, but Picture of the Cloud, it's mixed meter in the verse. So it has a kind of a section that feels like 4/4 with it. I think there's a 2/4 bar in there, and then it has 2 bars of I think of it as triplets, which is not triplets totally. It's like, I don't know. It's like 2 bars of 3. So it has a very different rhythm. It's a little bit unsettling after you've been in this like trance, like you said, with Amaranth of the waves. the 6/8 movement of the song. So the lyrics, I think, kind of come into play with that decision as well. The lyrics of Amaranth are not actually that peaceful. So there's a little bit of a juxtaposition there as well, and I think that the drum part in that song, the sort of drums in the distance, they sort of are like a little bit of a warning. It kind of the way that the way that I see it now when I'm listening to it now. I didn't think about that when I was recording it. I was just, oh, that sounds cool. But now, you hear the drums in the background and they start off boom, boom. And they sort of build up throughout the song, Amaranth. And the words of that song they're really based in nature. And even I think that the very first line, I talk about riding each muddy wave of the swift Hiwassee. So I'm talking, it's located here, it's the Hiwassee River that I had in my mind when I wrote that song. But it really has this whole natural world metaphor of the way that the natural world is changing. And of course, to be totally honest with you, I want it to sound really deep, but the reality was I was teaching the environment to my IB class at the time. So I ended up just writing a song about that, from a certain sense. But it obviously becomes a lot more than that, because the song at the end, it starts to be from this perspective of this older person, or maybe even of the earth, and watching all of these changes happen and just sort of asking, like, what's going to be left?
Rachelle Barr will be back next week to talk more about her new album, the album she made as Cartinglee, called A Little Fog. This is Talking Writing on Scenic Roots here on listener-supported public radio in Chattanooga.